Hey guys, welcome back to the Football Diary podcast. I'm back here with Dave today, and we're picking over the final day of the Premier League season. You could argue that there was a lot of drama on the day, but pretty much the only issues to be resolved were the European places. So not a massive amount to talk about, really. But having said that, Leicester City were probably the only set of fans that were kind of more nervous than most, I think, weren't they, Dave? Because it to and fro no end in the sort of first half of the games, especially. I think Leicester took the lead and then Spurs pulled it back. So the top four race was actually quite tense for the most part. What did you make of it? What was your highlight of the day?
It was a case of, did anyone actually want Champions League next year, wasn't it, at the end, really? Yeah. The race that was decided in the end, it seemed like all teams were doing their best to mess up, apart from Liverpool, who strung 8 wins, I think, in the last few games, which was really impressive. So it was more of a case, was it either going to be Chelsea or Leicester who were going to make it, rather than, weeks ago we were thinking, Liverpool were out of it.
Yeah.
So I think obviously it was we thought it might be a bit of a dead weekend, but obviously thankfully it didn't prove to be the case. But in terms of entertainment value, I think it was as good as it could have been from what we might have hoped for. But obviously, Leicester fans are going to be distraught, I think, from obviously last season and missing out just on the last day and it happening again. It's a little bit of a bittersweet moment because obviously they've just had the success of the FA Cup final and obviously winning the FA Cup and now losing out again. It's kind of ended on a sour note. But I think the players can do themselves proud. I think what Leicester really are missing is a bit of experience in there. They've got Johnny Evans, who's won league titles. They've got obviously Casper, who's won one. They've got Jamie Vardy, but there's a lot of inexperienced young players in that team still. And I think they just need probably a couple of young heads. And it sounds daft to say, but the year that they just managed to avoid relegation, the season before they won the title, they had Esteban Cambiasso, and he was unbelievable in that midfield role. He really dragged them through that season, and it was arguably probably play of the season for them. And then obviously the next year they went and won the league. But it goes to show that you do need these experienced heads in who've been through, the tough times and able just to kind of have that bit of know-how to see games through. You've got to see those tough periods through in games, and obviously Leicester is still a very inconsistent team. I feel like in periods throughout the season, they go from looking brilliant to really kind of having tough periods in the season. It's something I feel like they'll definitely be looking to work on. I know they're earmarking a couple of signings. I think Soumer, is coming from France, who's a really promising midfielder. He's been rumored to, but I do feel like they probably just need a couple of more experienced players to kind of get a bit of experience in that team, because it is relatively still pretty fresh.
It's funny you should say that, though. You talk about Cambiasso, but the signings they've been making recently have all been like pretty young, up-and-coming players. So I think of an older, more experienced head as a signing, especially someone in the ilk of Cambiasso, might be against their current recruitment policy, because there's no resale value. There's only 2 to 3 years out of a player like that. So it would be a bit of a change for them, but I totally see what you mean. If they had a player with leadership qualities as well to step in, as well as Johnny Evans to support the team structure and keeping it in place, because when he was out of the team, it made such a difference to the whole structure of the side, didn't it? They just lacked that leadership and that voice behind them, telling them how to sort of stay in shape. And I think a player like that would really support that.
Yeah, definitely so. They've shown, obviously, it's mainly been lapses in concentration, Leicester City. It's been moments like, for instance, obviously on Sunday with Tottenham, when it was a mad few minutes and they were losing the game from being 2-1 up. It was just, a bit bizarre, really.
Yeah.
I think obviously Casper did make a mistake. I know he was saying it was foul, but I think that was rubbish.
He did.
He had an unfortunate moment where he's made a mistake in like a pivotal moment in the game, and it swung the momentum.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate, because obviously his heroics in the FA Cup final, we were there to see, and I think they'll be very they'll be gutted. But
Yeah.
for a team like Leicester, the thing is now is you do say about, obviously we're talking about Dortmund the other week and saying how, people come and cherry pick their players and take them to their team. Leicester don't want to be seen as a team like that. They don't want to be a nearly team who are fighting for top four, and then the big four are coming in and kind of taking a pick of the players. But I hope it's not like that. But it could.
I can't see it being like that. I mean, they've been progressing over the last couple of seasons, and you could argue that winning a cup and still staying in 5th place is progress, really, isn't it? Because if they'd have taken that at the start of the season as an option, they'd have gone, do you know what, that would be a decent season all said and done. But I think the worst thing is that they stayed in the Champions League places for the whole season right up until this final hurdle. That's the most gutting thing, really.
And it was the same. It was the same story again. Losing games, conceding silly goals against teams they should be beating, Newcastle, Southampton.
Yeah.
And then they
really
go and beat Man United, and they just need a result against Chelsea or Tottenham, and not either. So it's a frustrating one. I can I can relate with. I think what you're saying there about obviously players potentially looking to go elsewhere. You'll be looking at players like Tielemans. Like I'd love him at Man United. I think he'd be a brilliant option for us in midfield. So there definitely will be teams looking at players like him, but obviously he's just he's looking to sign a new contract, is he? I think.
Yeah. Well, I think Leicester are aware of how his contract really doesn't represent his value to the team now, because he's stepped up, hasn't he, this season? But then also there are clubs that are circling him, and we'll probably earmark him as a future investment because he's so young still. Still got a lot of potential.
Yeah. They've got a fragile midfield.
Yeah, perfect signing for a team like them. But he's got the quality to compete at that level. So it will be a setback to be out of the Champions League, obviously. But I can't see him going just yet. I think it'd be a case of maybe another season and see how Leicester are in a year's time, maybe. Because they do need to get to Champions League level consistently, don't they, really? Because they've got players there that are good enough for that. And if they don't maintain that level, they are going to go, which is sad, really. But on the flip side, Liverpool pulled it back massively. And to see them at 3rd, when I think at one point they were sort of sitting in 8th and languishing, really, their form has been pretty impressive, hasn't it, over the last few weeks?
Yeah, they've kind of put it all back together again, haven't they? I mean, there's been times when they've not been so convincing, and they have profited from a couple of lucky breaks over the last few weeks. The one against West Brom, where West Brom. I mean, you create your own luck sometimes, and I think they've done a lot better in the last few weeks. Been more convincing performances, and they've actually won the games that you'd expect them to win. Obviously lost to Burnley earlier on in the season. They've got the old notorious performance against Crystal Palace about 7 years ago or so. So you kind of always wondered if they would, slip up again. But fair play to them. They've done the business. They did what they needed to do.
Yeah.
And the only thing really is where they're going to look to go to in the summer in the transfer window, and that's, I think, we were discussing that last week. What's going to happen with this front three, whether they'll stay another season or two. But I think it's the only thing is they've got quite a few players that are quite injury prone, haven't they? Obviously, Jota.
They've got a pretty vulnerable looking squad, and I mean their squad depth is decent, but it's nowhere near as good as City and Chelsea, is it? Let's face it. But I think it's a period of time now for Jurgen Klopp where he's got a chance to prove whether he is like a short-term manager or whether he's like a dynasty manager, whether he can turn around an aging sort of squad that needs a bit of freshness, really, doesn't it? And sell on big names that need to go. So, I mean, we talked about Sadio Mane, didn't we, the other week? I think we could still get a good price for him. And I think he's kind of the one out of the front three that I think they need to really cut loose and maybe invest in some fresh legs, because he just didn't look that bothered. I mean, he looked different in front of a home crowd in the last game, but up to that, his attitude didn't look anywhere near where it needed to be for that level. So if he's brave enough, Jurgen Klopp, to sell on a player like Mane and then reinvest that, then all credit to him. but I'm not so sure he will. And I'm not so sure he'll still be a Liverpool boss in a couple of years' time, but I might be wrong. There seems to be like quite a few changes they need to make there, because like Wijnaldum's contract's run out as well. He's a pretty big player for them in field. So it's a difficult and weird situation for Liverpool to be in. To finish there, it's great news, but they do need to make some changes, I think, in the summer.
I think what Liverpool fans need to kind of understand is that, when teams go through transitions and refreshing the squad, there's not always instant rewards, are there?
No.
We've seen it being United fans throughout the years. Obviously, when we had Ronaldo and Rooney when they were young, it took us 2 or 3 years to kind of get back in amongst, competing with Chelsea like we did. So it might be a case of, refreshing the squad and, try building up some sort of structure again, because at the end of the day, they do have, Salah, what is he, 28? 28, 29. So they've kind of in their peak and the peak of their powers right now. It's not going to get. They're not going to get any better now. It's going to be they're as good as they are. Well, I would have thought so anyway. But and you got Firmino in there, who's a bit. We don't know whether he's actually the first choice in that team, because Jota, when he came back fit, was starting over him. So it's a bit uncertain, isn't it?
Well, they've made a few signings as well that haven't really elevated them as well. So obviously with Van Dijk's injury, they've had to rely on some centre-backs that aren't really the quality they need. So I think their recruitment needs to get back on point again, but I do think they need some money behind them. I'm not sure how well off their board is and how much of a position they're in to reinvest out of their own capital, but I reckon they're going to need to sell a big player to make any kind of big recruitment happen.
There's rumours that they're in final stages of signing Ibrahima Konate from RB Leipzig. I think that's for about $50 million for release clause, and he's a brilliant prospect, but he's had injury problems. It's the same old story, It's I think it's a little bit of a risk, to be honest.
Yeah.
And there's no doubt in his talent and his potential as a player. He's actually impressed more than what Upamecano has for RB, but he has had he's notorious a little bit for injuries. Again, that could be a risk. It could be a risk. Well, it could be a risk that pays off for them. But when they've already got Van Dijk coming back from a big injury, you don't know if he could be the same player. It's happened before. Players come back from big injuries, and they find a while to kind of get back to that level, or they don't.
True. So, Jordan Henderson as well. He's been out for a while, and he's at an age now where is he going to recover the attributes that made him so successful? Who knows? So a few question marks about Liverpool. Chelsea, on the other hand, were lucky, very lucky. It was only Leicester's lack of energy, I think. Leicester just ran out of steam in the end that let them in. So Chelsea lost obviously 2-1 in the end to Aston Villa, which was a tense affair as well. But they're in there nonetheless in fourth place. Do they deserve to be there on the balance of the season, do you reckon?
Best of a bad, well, not a best of a bad bunch. Bad bunch.
Well, they were, I think when Thomas Tuchel took over, they were like 9th in the Premier League. So when you consider that, they've done really well. But they were... Go on.
I think he's going to be a victim of his own success, though.
That's it, yeah.
He's recovered now. He's gotten to 2 finals. He's lost 1 final already. He's in line to lose another final. So how's that going to look to Roman Abramovich?
Yeah, well, he's just won. He started out so relentlessly, getting the club back on track. That, like you said, he set the standard, really, didn't he? We suddenly had this vision of Chelsea being pretty invincible and hard to beat, but they've proven pretty flimsy in the last few games, haven't they? And the thing that shocks me is how easy they are to beat when they go behind. They've got no willingness to turn it around. There's no plan B. And we said that when they got beat by West Brom quite early on in his time, that West Brom just took advantage of them going down to 10 men and they didn't have an answer. And it was similar when Villa sort of took a hold on the game. Chelsea weren't really fighting for it. They didn't look like they had top 4 on the line, which was a bit surprising, really. I thought they would be.
No, it's a little bit similar to our finish last season. United kind of stumbled to a finish. We couldn't win games towards the end of the season.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of inconsistencies there, and kind of it's getting towards the end of the season. You're thinking, well, Chelsea aren't performing now. What's their confidence like going into a Champions League final?
That's true.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if I want to be. I don't know if I want to be a player in that team with that kind of pressure on me now, knowing that we need to go and win. And can you imagine if they finish out of the top four now, what the pressure would be like going into the Man City game? It would be
literally all or nothing, wouldn't it? Yeah. Well, we were talking a few weeks ago about how Chelsea were probably the team to beat going into the final, but I mean, City have been continuously like at top form, and they even went into a dead rubber game against Everton and thrashed them 5-0. So they've been flying still, and Chelsea have just been stuttering. Like you said, a victim of Tuchel's success probably, but it's not a great set of figures and data for the last few games going into playing Manchester City, is it? I mean, if anything, I would put City as more heavy favourites now than they've ever been for this final, just on the basis of Chelsea's stuttering form in the last few games.
We did wonder, didn't we, when obviously they beat City in the semi-final of the Cup, and obviously they beat them in the league after that, and then it's kind of gone a little bit pear-shaped for them. I feel like, obviously, you were mentioning about against Villa, West Brom, they've just seemed to struggle to break teams down at the minute. And that's down to a combination, I think, of them not really having a prolific striker in there. I don't think they're creating enough chances. I think sometimes they're a little bit vulnerable to get at in between the lines as well. Obviously, when you were talking about playing Jorginho in that midfield role, I don't think they'll play him against Man City because he's just not got the legs. He's not got the legs to get back.
That's true.
And defend. So there's numerous reasons, I think, to why they are a little bit kind of not quite a functioning machine, we could say. They've got the personnel there, they've got some really solid players. I do feel like they do need a striker. I think Werner, he's got about an offside goal in him every single game.
It's been that way lately, hasn't it? It's kind of the norm now. But no, he can't bend his run enough. He's almost like not suited to the defensive line that English teams play at the minute. I mean, he's not been there long, but you think he'd be there long enough now to learn how English defences line up and how they push forward to play the offside, and he's just not adapted really, has he? So I'm not sure if he's the long-term answer for them, but he's one of Germany's main threats, isn't he? So he's definitely got some attributes that are positive for Chelsea potentially, but they need, for their system, I think, an outright number 9, don't they really? They need a goal scorer. Ironically, they need a Harry Kane sort of that kind of numbers really just to finish them off, because apart from that, they're looking okay. Their balance in midfield is about there. Like you say, Jorginho has been a bit of a mixed bag lately. I don't think he's the player that needs to start against Man City. Definitely not. But up front is just, that's such an obvious glaring miss in their team, isn't it? Just the focal point for the attack and somebody just to finish off the amount of chances they create, because they do create plenty.
Yeah, definitely. I know. We spoke about players like, Didier Drogba. They'd kill for a striker like him right now, wouldn't they?
You're not kidding. Yeah.
Play up, and they've got pace in wide areas as well, Chelsea, not just in, the front areas, but obviously at wing back. They've got Reece James, who's a brilliant wing back. So I think, it's really difficult one, isn't it? Because you say there's only a very few strikers that are really going to take them to that next level, and obviously just Kane being one of them. I can't see him going Chelsea. I think it'll either be Man City or Man United. I think he won't want to peeve off Spurs supporters even more by Chelsea. So I do think it'll be City.
I think he wants to stay in England because he wants that Premier League goal scoring record as well. Ultimately, I think that's what's driving him.
Yeah, I think I was reading an article earlier. I think Danny Murphy was talking about Harry Kane and where he'd go to. He did say, obviously, if you were Harry Kane and if you wanted to challenge, like Van Dijk, for instance, when he went to Liverpool, £70 million, Liverpool weren't really, they had not won the league yet. They were sort of on the verge of becoming a better team, and they weren't you wouldn't think, you bank on them winning the league, because they've just been notorious for bottling it over the years, basically, when they have got close to it. And I think Danny Murphy basically said that if he wants a challenge and he feels like he could be the man to take this team to the next level, he could see Man United as an attractive prospect for that.
Yeah.
But if you want silverware, basically what he said is, if Man City are always going to be competitive. They're always going to be competing with trophies. They could win the league without Harry Kane next season, and you wouldn't be surprised. So if you want guaranteed trophies, go to Man City. But they don't desperately need him. I don't think they've played without a striker this year.
I'm not sure whether Man City would go for somebody of his age, though. That's the thing. For that kind of money, they're definitely in for somebody like Haaland instead. I think he's probably their next big signing.
Well, you've got to say if they do go for Harry Kane, then where's Haaland going to go to? Because the two Spanish teams haven't really got the funds, you wouldn't think, right now.
No. Well, Barcelona are taking on Sergio Aguero, when apparently Luis Suarez wasn't good enough a year ago or wasn't young enough, yet they're going for Sergio Aguero. What's that all about? So that's a strange way that the leagues have now changed, isn't it? La Liga are taking the Premier League's older players as opposed to vice versa.
It's like a rewind to when we signed Alexis Sanchez and Falcao and Angel Di Maria, isn't it? Really, I don't doubt that he'll probably be a useful player there, but Barcelona still seem to be living in the Galactico era. They went from La Masia and promoting all these absolutely brilliant young players, and they've kind of rewound from that. They signed Dembele for 140 million.
Silly money.
It's just a strange situation.
But that was the effect of the Neymar transfer, though, wasn't it? That's changed for that year or two. Transfer fees were just all over the place. But having said that, back to the Premier League. If we're talking Harry Kane, if he does stay in the Premier League, it's Man City, Man United, or Chelsea. There's no one else who could compete for that kind of transfer fee, really, is there? Realistically.
The only thing is, if United go for him, they won't be buying Jadon Sancho because the owners aren't going to pay him.
True. So, well, that's the choice that a lot of clubs are going to make. Is it going to be Harry Kane or is it going to be someone under 25 who's got a good decade in them of competing at the highest level for the same fee, pretty much, isn't it? Maybe even cheaper.
I mean, if Man City get him, we may as well pack it in and just bother next year, haven't we? Really?
Yeah. Pretty much.
I think. Yeah, if it was, I can see him going to City realistically, but if I'm United right now, I would go for Sancho instead of Kane because he's got the years in him. He's only just turned 21. The numbers that he's producing are like ridiculous. He's everything that we need on that right wing, and you know what? We've got some brilliant young players coming through, but we can't rely on them being absolute world beaters every single time. You're not going to have your likes of Mason Greenwood coming into the Premier League and being able to score goals straight away from the youth setup. It just doesn't happen. So I think it'd be an interesting one to see where he does go. I think it won't come out until after the Euros, will it?
No.
It's not settled. It's probably going to be a long-winded one if Daniel Levy's anything to go by.
Guaranteed. Well, that brings me on nicely onto the next sort of things that was settled on the final day of the season, and that's the rest of the teams that qualify for Europe. So obviously Leicester go into the Europa League, which is disappointing for them. West Ham joined them in 6th place, which is fantastic for them. So just a moment on West Ham season, Dave. How good have they been overall? I mean, they'll be gutted to not be near the top 4, but in the grand scheme of things, 6th place is such a good achievement for them.
Yeah, I think one thing that stood out to me, West Ham are just really actually leaving their mark on games now. Even if they don't go on and win games, they're actually keeping the ball better. Possession stats are higher, more consistent. They've got a higher level of technical players. They've made some good acquisitions, just some smart purchases, really. Obviously, Kufal at right fullback for them has been really good.
Yeah,
really good signing for them. Souček, obviously, who they had on loan initially and then made that permanent, has been revelation for them. And obviously, you've had the likes of Lingard come in. He's gone a little bit quieter the last couple of games, but he's been, scored 8 or 9 goals for them.
Yeah, still phenomenal.
Exactly, yeah. And I think the thing is, you can't be unrealistic and just miss out on. You even had West Ham in the top 6.
No.
So,
it's mind-boggling. I think I saw a stat somewhere that said that West Ham's points total this season is their highest accumulation of points in the Premier League era, or since the 80s or something like that. When you think of some of the West Ham sides of the past and how they've been competing for sort of top 10 finishes and some of the players they've had, that's mental.
It's crazy, actually. The most successful West Ham side I can think of when they had Jermaine Defoe there. I used to hate when United played against West Ham because it always seemed like he'd be the one to score against us. Imagine if there was a striker like him now, Jermaine Defoe, in that team at a young age.
Yeah. No, West Ham have got a really good squad, and I think the difference that David Moyes has made is he's brought players in that fit his character, that fit his personality and the kind of teams he wants to build. And the players that were there that were nowhere near the kind of player that he would sign, he's just cast aside. And people said that the kind of players that they were losing, that they signed for stupid transfer fees in the first place and making a huge loss on, that it wasn't really the right financial thing to do for a club of West Ham size. They should have kept on to them, or at least got their value back up to the right place. But they weren't David Moyes players. So he'd done the right thing. He cast them aside, got his own players in, moulded the team in his own sort of style. And they're playing in a way that is functional. It's not pretty all the time, but they're dead hard to beat. They're so hard to beat, and I think that's why they are where they are.
Yeah, they've got a good setup, haven't they? Really, they're a well-drilled unit. Talking about West Ham players, I'm not just mentioning Jared Bowen. I think he's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, he's had a good season.
He provides so much energy down the wing for them, and I really rate him actually. I really think he's a brilliant player. I'd take him at United over Dan James.
Yeah. Well, I think for energy levels, if that's all that Dan James has got going for him, really, hasn't he, the poor guy? But and we'll talk about United in a bit, to be fair. But I think in terms of West Ham, he's been one of them players that's really sort of stepped up into his position in the team, and they've made signings like Dawson at centre back, who raised a few eyebrows, but he's made a really big impression. Declan Rice has had a decent season, which bodes well. Fornals scored a brace at the weekend, didn't he? He did really well. So they've had some good players that have shown up for them. But I
think if I was West Ham now, and it'd be an absolute no-brainer, Tony at Brentford, he'd be absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, but if they get promotion, maybe not.
He's not going to leave, is he?
No, but if they miss out, I'd be all over Tony. I think he'd be an in-demand striker, to be fair. He's one of them players like Ollie Watkins, I think.
He's definitely, he's got the physicality that'll, brilliant. And what David Moyes would like, he'll definitely be on numerous Premier League team shortlists this summer.
I agree. So in terms of Europa League competition next season, are Leicester and West Ham equipped to deal with that kind of extra football, do you reckon?
Leicester, I think the only thing with West Ham is they do lack the depth. Really, I think they are a little bit fragile in terms of that. They could do with, I think, a few acquisitions or something just to kind of strengthen up on that side of things, because we have seen teams go into Europe and struggle in the league because the amount of games do just add up.
Yeah, plenty.
It's something definitely that they need to look at. And I think in terms of Leicester and kind of building their profile, that's a brilliant trophy to target. If they could win the Europa League next season, they need to build upon this FA Cup final, this FA Cup win. Because it's such a big part of history, and it's something really that it's something that United needed this season. They need a cup. Win the game obviously on Wednesday night. But in terms of building their own their own name, Leicester, because they're still not actually well known in world football. They just need to kind of push on now, and it'll be interesting to see them next season. I'm actually really looking forward to the next season already. But obviously we've got the Euros.
Yeah, I think Leicester in the Europa League is actually quite an exciting prospect because they could do well. I think if they prioritised it more and actually, had a few extra players to deal with the squad rotation, then they could go quite deep in it. And if they lifted a European trophy or at least got to a final, that would make such a name for them, wouldn't it? That makes a huge difference to to Brendan Rodgers' legacy at the club.
they've still got some players to come back as well. I think they've really missed. I think Luke Chambers has done well since he's come in for Leicester, but I think they've really missed James Justin. I think he was arguably their player of the season up until the point he got injured.
Yeah.
I think they've missed him defensively. He's really good defensively as well as he is going forward, and he's chipped in with 2 or 3 goals, hasn't he? He scored a couple of wonder goals as well.
Yeah, he gets forward quite well, doesn't he? I think with Chilwell not there anymore, he's kind of filled that attacking void really well. You're right.
Definitely. He's the main reason they've not missed Chilwell. They've not missed him one bit, to be honest, when he's been in the team. So I fancy him for England, to be honest. The next year, I think he'll have a call up for England.
Yeah, potentially. He just needs a clean, consistent run in the team, doesn't he, really? No injuries. And I think a competition like the Europa League would raise his profile no end. And obviously, if they're rotated, he's going to get game time, isn't he? So, yeah, Leicester's squad looks pretty exciting. I think if they can treat the Europa League seriously, that'd be quite a reputation builder for them on the continent, really, wouldn't it?
I think, obviously, they've been playing back 5. They played a back 5 against Chelsea, didn't they?
Yeah.
Final. I think they've obviously got Castagna, haven't they? Who can actually play as part of a 3. And obviously, you got your wing backs. You've obviously got Pereira on the right hand side, who's been missing as well, and then Justin on the left. They've actually got making like a really solid team.
It's not bad at all. I'm going to touch on another European qualifier as well, just because Tottenham qualifying for the Europa Conference League is quite funny. I don't really know what the Europa Conference League actually entails. I mean, it's been slated already, but we don't even know its prestige, if there's any. I think that's the problem. It looks like a consolation prize for those that missed out on the bigger European competitions, doesn't it? But how are Spurs fans going to feel now? How's Harry Kane going to feel when that's their European competition? Is it going to get in the way, or is it going to be something they can realistically challenge for and feel chuffed about if they win it?
Is it the reincarnation of the Intertoto Cup?
It's not that bad, no. I think its reputation's taken a battering, Dave, but it's not that bad, no. It's that's the thing. I don't even know like the mechanics of it. I don't even know what kind of teams it's going to attract. But I mean, if our 7th place team is getting in it, what's the Liga's 7th place team? I've not looked, but the quality in some leagues becomes diluted when you get to sort of 7th place, doesn't it? So if it's that kind of caliber of team that's just below the Europa League standard, it's not going to be the prettiest competition, is it?
Yeah, it's, we don't need to talk about what Harry Kane's going to think of it, do we really? We already know.
No. Well, it's a rhetorical question, really.
We know what his intentions are. It's just a question of whether he's going to be able to engineer a move. Yeah, it's not. Listen, in terms of Tottenham as a club, there's numerous players there at the minute. Probably thinking whether they actually want to stay there. Son being another one. If Kane leaves, what is his intention? Because there's going to be clubs queuing up to sign it.
Yeah.
So I think, as a competition, it's. I don't know if it's needed. I don't think it is. We talk about kind of like the glamour or lack of glamour of the Europa League now. It struggles. I struggle, to be honest, to watch it sometimes. Especially the group games and let's not even talk about qualifiers, but it's just I just think it's unnecessary.
It always involves teams that are seemingly sort of far flung across Europe as well, so it tends to be a lot of travel, doesn't it, to places like in leagues in Russia, for example. And I think for a team that's playing Thursday, Sunday every single week, it's quite grueling to have the extra mileage in as well. I mean, it'd be all well and good if you're traveling to sort of Spain and Italy, but it's not that caliber of team, I don't think, that's going to be in this competition. So, yeah, not the most enticing prospect.
And the thing is, and you get some of these, sometimes on the odd occasion, the big clubs might get into the Europa League. They don't even play the first string team off the time.
Not really, not till the last stages.
Exactly. Yeah. So just, again, it's one of those things. Is the group stage actually needed in the Europa League? Definitely less so than Champions League.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a strange one. And Tottenham, I'm sure, will be over the moon to have qualified for it. But yeah, they've got a difficult season ahead, haven't they, Tottenham, speaking about them, because obviously Ryan Mason's not going to be the permanent solution for them. What kind of manager is going to take Tottenham on now? and deal with the Harry Kane situation after the Euros, and try and negotiate with Daniel Levy about a transfer kitty and things like that, because they've got a lot going for them. They've got a gorgeous stadium and they've got the skeleton of a decent team still, but how much work do they need really to make them challenge for the title again, to become Champions League finalists again? There's a lot they've fallen behind since Pochettino left. Heck of a lot.
They're a light year away from being competitive. And that's the thing. I think as a Tottenham fan, if I was a Tottenham fan, I'd be demoralised right now.
Well, who's at fault there? Is it Mourinho or is it Daniel Levy? Who's actually made that become the state of Tottenham Hotspur? Whose fault is it?
Daniel Levy has made this decision to recruit Mourinho, as it was his decision to get rid of Pochettino.
Yeah.
So, you've got to look at the direction of and where they're trying to go with it. Just their whole journey over the last 2 years has been bizarre. Like going from finishing runners-up in the Premier League to being Champions League finalists to I don't even know where it's going to spiral to.
Yeah.
But would you rather manage at the minute, Arsenal or Tottenham? It's a hard question, isn't it?
Probably Arsenal, because I feel like they're still going to get some transfer investment. Whereas Tottenham, I'm struggling to see where the money's coming from unless they sell on a big player. And you know what Tottenham are like negotiating a transfer out of the club. It's a stubborn stalemate most of the time. So, yeah, I think the last couple of years have been such a strange one. They had the potential to kick on and compete because they got to the Champions League final. They could have recruited some quality players on the back of that. And they recruited, I think, nobody that summer. Was it that summer they didn't recruit anybody? Which was ridiculous. And they needed people because they were burning out that season straight after the Champions League final. They burnt out their first 11 and they're still not really recovered. So, yeah, Jose Mourinho being in charge wasn't the greatest move. But I think also not giving Mauricio Pochettino the transfer funds he needed 2 years ago was probably the start of the demise, really, because they've got a squad now that looks shattered. It looks demoralised. And what kind of coach is going to go into that? They were talking about Nuno Espirito Santo, who's obviously just left Wolves, stepping into the Tottenham job, and Brendan Rodgers and managers of that ilk. I don't even think they're going to attract managers like that anymore. They seem more ambitious than Tottenham. So where do they go?
I think they need to gamble on an up-and-coming manager, really, Tottenham.
Yeah.
On somebody that's going to bring new ideas and just get the best out of them as players, because they haven't got the best personnel. They're not going to have it after this summer,
No.
Attack's going to be torn apart as soon as Kane leaves. It's about whether they can reinvest that money into the right players. History suggests they can't.
Mm-hmm.
They seem they're still playing players like Lamella, who how long has he been at Tottenham?
Well, he was meant to be Gareth Bale's replacement back in the day, wasn't he? So 7 years? It's crazy. Yeah, they're short on quality, and they had the chance to recruit when they were at the peak, and they didn't, and they're paying the price for that. So kind of not got any sympathy for them, which is sad because I think Tottenham were like a lot of neutrals' next best Premier League team, weren't they? The next favourite, because Pochettino really made them a likeable team. Now, I think after Mourinho's been in charge, they just don't look like that kind of club anymore. You don't look at Tottenham and think, yeah, they're the kind of club to follow in terms of the way they operate. And that's quite sad, but also a little bit funny for rival fans to see. It's a lesson, really, isn't it? Come on. It's a lesson in a lack of investment in a team, how that can have an effect on, I don't know, even 2 years. It's not a long time in football, but 2 years down the line, they look like a shadow of the team they used to be.
Yeah, it's a strange. It's a very strange one. They're obviously victims of underinvestment. When we saw, speaking back to obviously similar when United sold Ronaldo, we bought Tan, Owen in, and Antonio Valencia.
Not the best recruitment, no.
And it's all down to everyone up top, really. If they don't see that there's a huge need to reinvest that money back into the squad, and they think that they'll just carry on to be competitive and hang around that top four kind of, quadrant, and it's frustrating, but I can see Arsenal finishing above them next season. To be honest, I think Arsenal have got makings of a decent young team. They've got like Willock, the best young player who's performing the best. It's Newcastle who scored 7 goals, seven successive games.
Yeah, brilliant return.
They've got some good young players coming through Arsenal, so but Spurs have got a lot on their hand, a lot to deal with, really.
Yeah,
staying competitive. I just don't know where they're going to go.
Speaking of big projects, there's a lot of teams in the Premier League that have got massive summers ahead of them. And not just that, but big rebuild jobs on the cards for various reasons. And we said goodbye to a couple of managers in the Premier League in Nuno Espirito Santo in Wolves and Roy Hodgson at Crystal Palace. And neither team's really had a spectacular season. However, their managers were kind of key to their club's identity. And I think Palace especially have got a team of players that are kind of running at the end of the contracts. They're coming to an end of their natural cycle with the club. They're aging a little bit. They've got a lot of rebuilding to do at Palace. Wolves have got a very clear identity that Nuno's built in 4 years. How are them two clubs going to rebuild, for example, with those managers out of the picture? Because we talk about the job that Spurs have got ahead of them. I'd argue that the job at Palace is bigger than that in some ways.
Yeah, again, it's going to be another one. I feel like Wolves will cope with it better than Palace do, just because I feel like they've got better players.
Yeah, of course.
I think there was a stat earlier on in the season that Palace have still had like 6 or 7 players in their team that they had in their first team like 5 years ago or something ridiculous.
Really? That don't surprise me, actually, because those names have appeared like in like fantasy football. You associate certain players with certain teams, and I've always got Milivojevic in my head because he's been there like penalty taker for so long. But I'm not surprised. He's been there 4 years, Roy Hodgson, so he's kind of trusted the same core of players. But that's also not a great thing because they're all kind of leaving the same time as he is. But I guess in some ways that's a good project for a manager to take on. But in the Premier League, that costs a lot of money.
I know there's been rumours of Frank Lampard potentially being a candidate. I don't know whether they'll risk that. Palace, I think they should probably, it's hard to say, isn't it? We've seen managers like Neil Warnock come in because he's an experienced manager. All he's ever done is get teams relegated from the Premier League. I feel like it could be, it could pay off, if you could bring Lampard in, and he would be an attraction to young players as well because he plays young players. True.
Very true, yeah. Well, he's got the likes of Wilf Sahar in the team and Eze as well. He's got some good young players there, so maybe. Yeah.
The only thing with Eze is obviously just done his cruciate, hasn't he? Trained recently, so they need a replacement for him next season because he's been brilliant for them this year. I feel like, maybe a manager like Lampard, it could do quite well. Maybe that's somebody that, for instance, like Zaha needs someone to get the best out of him because he can, see what a good player he can be.
Fair point.
I feel like he could do a job. It is difficult, isn't it? Because there are a lack of football's changed, as we've seen kind of over the years, and the way the game played now at such a higher pace that a lot of the more experienced managers have actually struggled a little bit to kind of keep up with it, like we've seen with Mourinho.
Sam Allardyce as well at West Brom.
Yeah, Sam Allardyce never got a team relegated until this season. And
he looked out of his depth, didn't he, this season, I think. Too big a job.
Yeah.
So, I think the Palace job's interesting. I think Wolves will probably go for somebody like Paulo Fonseca, who's just been departed the Roma job, hasn't he? So that seems like a good fit for obvious reasons, the Portuguese connection. But then Crystal Palace seems like it could have somebody. It needs somebody younger because if it's somebody older in charge of a rebuild, you know what kind of players they're going to sign. And they don't need that. I think Palace is a good opportunity to freshen up the squad with youth. Maybe sign some players up and coming from the Championship or something like that to give them some fresh impetus because they do need something. But in terms of the Tottenham job, I think that's really sort of a good one for somebody like Nuno as well, if he wanted to. Because I reckon Nuno will probably go somewhere like back to Portugal for one of the top three. But if he did, that'd be so predictable. And I really would like to see him in the Premier League still. I think he's got a lot to offer.
Yeah, he's put his imprint on that Wolves team, hasn't he? And I think in terms of Tottenham, I was gonna one name I was gonna mention, who's kind of been thrown into a little bit of obscurity now, is Hasenhüttl at top Southampton. His name touted not massively, thinking, he's the next big manager to come into the Premier League, and he's gonna kind of, potentially be touted for one of the top six positions. And the position they've gone for on the top of the league, I think, what was it, like game week 6 or 7?
Back in November or something, I think it was. Yeah, they were top of the table.
Out of the relegation zone now. That was a little bit of a strange one. I do rate him. I like him as a manager, and to tell you what, Southampton have been a bit unlucky. They've had a few injury problems, and Ings has been kind of in and out of the team as well.
Yeah.
I fancy them to maybe take a chance on someone like him, to be honest.
I rate Hasenhüttl. I think he's a really, really quality coach. He's a good man manager, and I think he's suffering at Southampton because the longer he stays there, it's a bit like Nuno. The longer he stays there, the more his reputation kind of gets damaged, and it feels like maybe 12 to 18 months ago, both Nuno and Hasenhüttl were like at the top of their powers, really. And ever since then, as results have been harder to come by, they've kind of hit heights they couldn't really get back to again. And Wolves, I think, as soon as they qualified for the Europa League, got so far in the Europa League, actually almost burnt out doing it, didn't they? Playing so many games. They haven't recovered since then. So I think Nuno's got out at the right time. Probably is a good time for Hasenhüttl to say his goodbyes as well and move on to something like that while his stock is still fairly high. Yeah, I agree.
I think as well, like one of Southampton's best players, Bertrand's just ran his contract down. He's leaving then, isn't he? So it's interesting to see whether other players might think that. There's obviously a lot of no one really knows what Danny Ings is going to do. He's been linked with Man United, a couple of other teams as well. So I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. He's going to be rebuilding the whole team again.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that's the thing. Danny Ings is somebody who could do a job, I think, as maybe not even the main striker, but at least a decent plan B for many of the top sort of 6 to 10 teams in the Premier League. So
even Chelsea,
Man City were interested. Yeah, Chelsea.
Danny Ings, he'd be brilliant for them.
Now. That's true. An actual Premier League finisher with proven quality could work out. It'd probably only cost them somewhere between 20 to 30 million as well, which is reasonable for a striker of the amount of goals he's scoring. So. Fair shout, Dave. Watch this space. See how it comes true. So, we've got nothing else to cover, really, because the Premier League was done and dusted a while ago for everything else. The only thing I will say is that, obviously, a lot of big names have left their clubs in the last game of the season. So, obviously, we said the two managers that are leaving. But you've also got, obviously, Aguero said his farewells. Wijnaldum's leaving Liverpool. Who else was there as well? The couple at Leicester, the Premier League winners, so Morgan and Fuchs have both left. There's been a weird season and a weird end to the season, hasn't it, really? Yeah,
there's been a lot of goodbyes and potentially more goodbyes to come as well. Obviously the big one, which we've already spoken about, Kane. So, it's going to be interesting to see what transpires now, I think, between now and kind of the beginning of next season. I think in terms of this, we've obviously spoken about a lot of situations that some teams are in need of complete rebuild and some are in need of 3 or 4 players. So I feel like it's going to be a big transfer window and a dramatic one as well.
I hope so, because the Euros are going to happen first. So I've got a feeling that a lot of business won't be done until that's out of the way, which is a shame because I want to see some changes made now. And I think some of the best teams usually get their business done early. I can't see that being the case this season. But the Euros will have a big impact on who's going where, I think.
I think there'll be a lot of cases where deals are done beforehand and not announced, obviously, until after.
Maybe.
Included. But, it's definitely an interesting one. It's kind of like a new era, really, coming in now in terms of European football. kind of seeing, as we're talking about, well, the Premier League season, it's actually seen kind of the Premier League clubs have dominated Europe this season, and obviously we're talking about it a couple of weeks ago. So it's going to be interesting to see if it gets even stronger. You know, the attraction the Premier League has, as the league, as the best, well known as the best league in the world.
Yeah,
is that can actually lead the likes of, you know, Haaland? Is he going to want to come to the Premier League? You know, you've got Mbappe as well.
Yeah.
Or is it just going to be a case of following the money and kind of the old attraction of Barcelona, Real Madrid? But we've seen the likes of quick one on La Liga. It's not the league that it was like 2 or 3 years ago when, you know, El Clasico was the biggest game. Now it's kind of like the game of two badly needed kind of teams of kind of full of veterans, really, isn't it?
They're teams that need investment.
So it's I'm looking forward to seeing what the transfer window brings, for sure.
Nice. Well, that's all we've got to talk about, Dave. Next time we're on the pod, we'll be talking probably all things Euros and England related, because the squad will be announced by midweek, I think, this week, won't it? But also maybe a rundown of how the Premier League teams have fared, and go into more detail about what that leaves a few of the teams looking like next season. We've touched on a few, haven't we? And the rebuilds they need to do. But in the next pods, look out for us going into a bit more detail for those. But in the meantime, pleasure, Dave. We'll be having, hopefully, the rest of the gang back next time we talk as well. But it's been quite nice just me and you talking for a change, Dave. I don't think we need the other guys in the pod anymore.
No, I don't think we've got all the we need, haven't we?
Yeah, it seems like it. No, it's never the same without them. But again, thanks for your time, Dave, and we'll speak soon. Thank you. Take care.